Welcome back to the Hunt Hike Harvest podcast. Joel Rather here in the booth. Always fun when we get to have someone actually physically sit in the booth. We've got Dustin Lovell with us today. He brought me a gift today. Well, I mean, I did pay for it, but he brought me some new death darts, as he calls them.
Yes, sir.
From Uhler's Archery. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, sir.
Gosh, I'm 2 for 2.
You're doing good.
I'm doing good. And we met kind of online, I guess you could say. Not in that kind of way, but you know what I mean. And
it's the new hunting dating scene, you know.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is.
So, but gotten to know each other over the last, I don't know, probably year and a half, something
About
like that. And this summer we got to kind of be pretty close by at some Western Hunt Fest events and keep in touch and doing some great things. I know we're going to get into all this stuff, so I got a lot of stuff kind of on my brain, but
absolutely.
Yeah, so excited. First of all, thank you. We're going to talk about these guys because I'm super pumped to get my hands on them, and they look really sexy. I want to show everybody. This is like the big reveal,
right? Absolutely. This is when you get that box, you crack it open.
Yeah,
you really showcase what it is. But I get to be here with you, so I get to see it live. I get the reactions post haste, or someone's calling like, "Oh, these are amazing. I really love it. Thank you." Especially when it's got like yours, and we'll get into the story behind that.
For sure.
It was meant a lot to me to do this. So
yeah,
this will be a fun discussion.
Yeah, and just in time because hunting season is right around the corner. Yeah, so these bad boys are going to get put to use right away. Hopefully I gave you the right specs.
And even if not,
we'll figure it out.
We'll talk about that methodology behind that. It's these are really designed. They're for you. Like I could not shoot these arrows. They will not fly the way they will for you.
Yeah,
the way they did for me. So this having that personal touch is really the key.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about. Let's start with just since we're on it, right? Let's talk about arrows. Let's talk about how did you get into building arrows? How did you get into building? Like these are super sexy. These are not your off the rack. Buy them, throw some tips on them, give me a knock, and let's go let her rip. These have a lot of really special touches to them, and I want to kind of let you run with it and tell, like, because I know you've made some new unique pieces, especially what's going on up front. And then you've got a lot of cool, just customized touches going on with these, not just these, but all of them. I mean, if you follow Dustin and what you're putting out on social media, I was like excited. The last like 3 videos you put out, I was like, are those going to be mine? Are those going to be mine?
And I actually have yours scheduled. It's going to go live tonight after the
podcast. I'm excited.
I didn't want you to get to have to see them right before I brought them for the reveal in person.
I was hoping. I was like, man, I want to be on those cool videos.
Oh, yours is pretty epic. So yeah, and I tried to really embrace kind of what you do, and actually there's going to be a little bit of an intro behind it. And again, this was a very special build for you.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get into that discussion later. That's actually a topic I really want to just kind of a heartfelt man-to-man discussion, because that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, for sure.
But the archery side of the business, it's been a lifelong thing for me. I've been a shooter since I was a kid. My granddad got me into it. I've not been a hunter that long, oddly enough, and that catches a lot of people off guard.
Right? Yeah.
I'm a very detail-oriented person, and if I don't like something, I'm the type that I'm going to go figure it out, and I'm going to do it myself to see if I can do it better. I've always been that way, and you talk to my friends and partners with Adam and Cole. Cole's my roommate in college. I've known Adam for going on 10 plus years now. He's who actually got me into hunting, and both those guys will flat out tell you.
Yeah, I got to talk with him last weekend, which was
cool. Oh yeah, because you saw him and Taylor Winter Western Hunt Fest.
Yeah.
He knows it better than anyone. I will figure it out. I may fail a couple of times, and we'll talk about those failures, right? And I just got to the point where I had been doing arrows for people for a while. I did it because I like tinkering. I like working with my hands. It's always been instilled with me. And I got sick of paying for something that wasn't what I expected it to be.
Right.
And nothing against the pro shops. There's a lot of great pro shops around here. And I would spend, when I didn't have a lot of money, have to spend a lot of money for a really good set of arrows, and they just weren't there.
Yeah.
So I finally broke down and said, well, I'm going to learn it.
I'll figure it out.
I went online. I did every article research you could think of. I started doing it myself. I failed miserably my first few times.
I can't even imagine. Like I've thought about this whole thing where I'm like, I know people that build their own arrows, and they just build them for themselves, right? And I think there's like this therapeutic thing to it almost, which
it's
is
like tying flies.
Yeah, right. Which I don't do that either. And I think part of it is for me has been time, number one, know-how, which I'd be doing what you do, right? It's like, okay, I've watched guys build them. I know, the components of what goes into these things, but how do you make sure that it is what you need and it's put together correctly and that they're going to fly straight and all that other stuff. And then just the techniques of, making sure that you're, putting them on, whether it's wraps or, the veins or all that other stuff and cutting them. And, I think I would enjoy it if I got into it. And then there's part of me that goes, yeah, but if I know somebody who knows how to do it, maybe I'll just make sure they do it for me.
Well, and I think that's the key thing about it is you talked about that peace of mind. And my daytime job, I work a very stressful job. I'm a VP for a very large company, and it's at the end of the day, there's times I don't want to talk to people, and I want to go downstairs. I want to turn on music, and I just want to do something constructive.
Yeah.
Not that what I do in my daily life isn't constructive. It's
sure.
It doesn't fulfill the same way creating does.
Yeah.
And I like that. And then it came about almost 2 years ago. It was really Adam, honestly. I just that nudge over the cliff of, you can make money doing this, and I know you like it. Right. And I think there's enough of a market need out there that you could carve out a spot in that industry and be successful. And he goes, and I have no doubt that you will be successful because that's just what you do. You will not stop until it's perfect.
Yeah.
And we did that with our rifles, and I build my own ammunition for that reason. So again, there was just a gap, and I know I can fix that. I may not be the smartest person in the world, but there's enough smart people out there that can teach me.
Yeah.
And just kind of the same path. And then it was the idea and the effigy of who Uller is. Yeah. Well, he's a Norse god of the winter, archery, and hunting.
Yeah.
Well,
I wanted to get to that, so I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's the first thing, I know like you got the shirt on, right? And so the shirt is the representation of what it is. And I know when I first, came in contact with you and I was like, what the heck is that? And I did like everybody at GTS, go Google that stuff, and I was like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. Right. Because, I've, number one, to find some uniqueness, which has some connectivity to the archery world, and no one else's. So, I mean, like kind of cool on you how did you find that? Or like, how did you come upon that? I mean, obviously what it means, but more so like, did you know about it before you found it? The name and the meaning, or was it something like we got to find something to stamp on this thing?
It's kind of both. Like I'm a huge history nut.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time studying Norse history. I like Norse mythology, and I watched a lot of Lord of the Rings. Let's be real, I'm a dork. Total nerd at heart. So despite the outer shell you're seeing, I'm a complete nerd. But it was just one of those things that I had seen it, I knew about it, and then I started to ask myself, like, what if I have to say what archery of Colorado? What is that?
Sure.
Well, I mean, we hunt when it's cold.
Yeah.
And we hunt in a cold that a lot of people have never seen until you start getting to the Northern Rockies in Canada. I mean,
right.
So it's wintertime, right?
Right.
And I started looking at what is something that's going to have an impactful name and an image that's really going to back it up. Because I see a lot of companies, and nothing wrong with some of the imagery that some companies use. Right. It's just passé, right? And that's pretty epic. And it's actually on your arrows, which is even better with the Colorado logo, which makes me happy.
Yeah, we hit both ends of it.
We crushed it on this one.
Yeah.
But it just, I wanted something that would also, when you see it, you know what it is.
Yeah, it's like, identifiable.
Yep. I wanted the logo to be something I could throw on a t-shirt. Really, there's no words on it, but people are starting to see and understand. I know what that logo means.
Yeah, it's branding, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a huge part.
And it's neat. And Uller, when you see the images of what Uller's described as, and sometimes he's a very large Nordic man with a bow. Other times he's this creature with antlers on his head coming out of the wood, and it was just almost kind of Skinwalker-esque, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. No, I get it.
But it was a neat image, right? And it was something that could get really simple, It didn't have to be truly overdone, but then I could embrace all the other imagery around Norse mythology that kind of flows into this. And we'll talk about
Josh. You met Josh, the big tall guy that helps with, that's his heritage. He's and he looks it too with the beard, and he's 6'5" and big dude. So
look at Derek Wolf, modern Viking.
Yeah, right. Like you apprate that.
I am not a Viking, but
no, I'm not. But we can't pick our parents so well, right?
It's a little thing. But we'll go into like the name of why we named our shafts a very specific name. It actually has a meaning behind it. And everything we try to do was connected, right? Yeah. So you create that brand presence. It's something that's cohesive, it's consistent.
Yeah.
And then hopefully people latch onto that. And you start to see that pass through the outdoor world and hopefully make a name for yourself.
Right. Well, it seems like you're on your way.
Doing a good job so far. It's fun. I mean, and a lot of people ask, I really, truly enjoy this.
Yeah.
This is my therapy. I love, like I said, I love tinkering. I love building, but I also love learning. And I think one of the coolest parts about the artistry industry is when you do make a mistake, and you're going to, and I've made several with this business, where you learn about products, you learn about application, you learn about certain uses of technology that may or may not work in certain circumstances. And we tried to develop something that was entirely ours. So you'll see, as we talk about a little bit later, the shaft, the arrow knock, the knock collar, the knock. You use a little bit of a different insert system than our standard, just because I know what you're going to be doing with it and it's new. I really want people to trust in the product too. That's the other key thing is, we're friends, so it's a little bit different, but I've had a lot of people I've never met build arrows for, ship them across the country. I have no idea what their environment's going to look like they're going to use them in. I just have a few key points of data.
Yeah.
And then it's just a complete trust factor that they're going to go into the field. They know something that left my hands is hopefully ending their hunt.
You're right. That this guy's going to do the trick.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the cool part is, I feel like there's always this real connection with arrows.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many times I've seen, when people complete a hunt and they fill a tag, and, I've seen people that, have written, things on their arrows, whether it's a saying, a meaning, something that's impactful to them or whatever else. And it's like, this is going to be the arrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they manage to find success. And then that arrow, assuming they find it, or, if hopefully if it still manages to be in one piece, like lives in eternity with, that hunt. And it's, it's even associated with that elk or deer or whatever. And a lot of times it's, hung on the rack with it or beside it or something like that. So I think that's cool because it gives you this connectivity to so many people's future stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, in some regard, I'm hoping one of these is going to do that for me.
It will, and I have faith.
Yeah.
And the other cool part about it too is, and then you latch on to, now you've got your recipe dialed.
Right.
I mean, you guys do that with ammunition all the time.
Right.
Like, I use 143 grain ELDX with 42.4 grains of RL16, and that's what I've killed deer with for the last 10 years, and they won't change.
Yeah.
Because it's successful, and a lot of archers that way too. I mean, you look at, and you met Levi and a few of the different guys that we shoot with at Western Hunt Fest. I mean, that guy's a tactician. He takes arrow building to a level that's even above me.
Yeah,
because he's testing constantly for perfection. Yeah. I think that's what's neat about being.
Did you meet Gavin also?
I had not met Gavin, but everyone's told me I need to have a conversation with him.
Holy cow, that dude! So Gavin, and I don't know if Gavin ever watched our podcast, but I sat with him at Western Hunt Fest. We were on the Western Slope, and he was talking about even how he had his stabilizer set up.
Yep. And
he was talking about inverting the traditional setup where the back stabilizer is the longer one or whatever. And he was talking about the balance of it and all these things. And he went on for like 5 minutes. And I was sitting there going like, huh? Like what?
Right.
And if you go to his Instagram page, he has some instructional kind of little videos on there where he talks about how you're approaching shots, and he shot through like a gap on one where it was like was just boards, but the target was 15, 10 yards behind the boards and common flaws and all these things. And I'm like, holy crap, man. I think when he was at Cheyenne Mountain, he shot like 226 or 228 or something.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it was absurd. And I was like, I bet I could learn a thing or two from that guy.
And that about this community is what draws me to it and what keeps me in it. And again, why we have friends like you and I is just, there is a connection, but there's not a level of pretentiousness. Right. And there's a lot of sports activities, let's be real, that if I went and asked you, because you're the best at it, and I asked you questions, that they would turn your nose up to you.
Yeah.
Or they would brush you off the shoulder of, I just don't have time. I've never met an archer. I've never met a hunter. I've never met an outdoorsman that will not at least take the time or give you context as to why they can't have that conversation at that moment, but they will always circle back to it.
Right.
And maybe that's a Western big game hunter culture that we have, and I'm thankful for it.
Sure.
But I just don't meet that many people that have that attitude around. They want people to learn and they want to help you grow. And if there's some tidbit of knowledge, and I'm going to brag on Joe from Elk Brothers for this.
Love Joe.
I am not a great elk caller. I will never claim to be. Adam has tried to teach me. I can do the cow. I can do the calf. I can kind of bugle.
Yeah.
But just one of those deals. Like, I was talking with Joe. It was about a 10-minute conversation. I was just asking, like, what is Elk Bros? What do you guys do? And kind of got into it. And he asked me how my calling was going, and I laughed. And the best part about it, though, is he didn't make me feel stupid.
No.
I mean, I've talked
Joe's a teacher. He's a coach.
Yeah, he's good. He's great with people. I mean, I've talked with Levi's another one again. He's an interesting guy to talk to just because he's just so good at what he does, but he's not afraid to give knowledge.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to push. I mean, we sent him a set of arrows. It was right off the bat when we'd gotten started. And again, kind of that learning phase of what products work really well, what don't, what really fits shooter styles. And the set that I'd gotten across to him, it had a failure on it. But he came back with real-time data around, here's where I think it failed.
Right.
Here's what I think you can do different. Here's what I've experienced in my setups.
Yeah.
And that was more impactful than anything.
Well, and the cool thing with that is because it was early on, having someone that has that kind of knowledge base to be able to actually provide you with tangible feedback because they have so much experience is huge, right? Because if you were to flip that and let's just say that set of arrows would have came to me, I would have been calling you like, bro, I don't know what the hell happened.
Yeah, like they're not doing what they need to do.
Yeah, I'm aiming right where it's supposed to go. It's not hidden there, whatever, right? Like, and maybe making myself sound like an idiot, but I feel like that part of the process too is that I liken archery in a lot of senses to golf. Yeah. It doesn't matter how much you do it. It doesn't matter how much you practice. It doesn't matter how many years you've been doing it. There is never a point where perfection is attained.
Nope.
And, and golf is the same way, right? And I always find it interesting when you are out on the range or you're shooting with a buddy or whatever, and we all have our good days, bad days, and whatever else, right? And everybody has a tip, right? They want to go, hey, do you think it's like this, or like, have you tried this, or like, what are you focusing on out there, or whatever? And you're just like, at some point, you're like, just leave me alone, dude. Like, I'll figure it out. Like, I'm gonna
get in the truck and turn on some sad music here a little bit, just wallow in my own self-pity, and we'll come back and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny because even people that are novices in archery, right, still love to shoot their bow. Yeah. People that suck at golf, they still love to go play golf. Right. I mean, that's
why I'm an archer.
But you know what I mean? Like people can go out and just hack it all over the place, and they'll come back tomorrow and be like, hey, you want to go again?
Because they found joy in it.
Exactly.
Right? And it's not something where, I mean, you go to some of these competitions, the pressure's a little bit high.
For sure.
But even then, it's still fun.
For sure.
And especially you get around a good group of shooters and you start ribbing each other, and then the tips become a little more real because then there's that trust. But that community, the hunting community, there's a level of trust that's not there in other sports
for sure,
and other engagements. And honestly, we go back to why I like doing it. Because I want to put something in your hand that you trust is going to do it.
Yeah. Well, and to your point too, I mean, I think a lot of what you said is another reason why we've really felt like working our way into the industry has been this breath of fresh air of people that are inviting, people that are willing to help, people that are interested in teaching you. You know, I've always had such a huge respect for, you know, John Dudley and guys like that, like that guy could probably tomorrow decide like, you know what? I don't think I'm giving all this information away for free anymore.
Nope.
And people would probably buy it hand over fist because of his knowledge. And he is willfully just gave away, you know, not given away, but like just offered up his expertise in ways to try and help people become better at shooting a bow. And it's amazing, you know, and that in our industry, in the training industry, is just like, that doesn't happen. I mean, yes, we have colleagues and people that are welcoming, inviting, and things like that. But once you get outside of your circle, it's like every man for himself, you know,
it's competitive nature, right? It's sports.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, let's do it. I want to get into this because this is my first opportunity to have him walk through this arrow build. It took a little while. We worked around a lot of different things in terms of how this arrow is actually constructed, what it's going to look like. There's a couple small intricate things in here that are very meaningful that you were awesome in helping kind of make happen. And so go, I guess I'm all ears.
So yours was fun. Yours was fun because, again, I know you shoot pretty proficiently. So it ups the level of build quality that has to be there, right? So a lot of people will go to the store, buy a pack of arrows off the shelf. They may get them cut, maybe not. They have some base knowledge of spine stiffness and what that does to the shot, and they go and have a great time with it. And I've never knocked that. I'll never bash anyone that does that. I mean, I used to golf with wooden golf clubs when everyone else was with TaylorMades. It's just, and I could golf well. People have gone and killed more deer with over-the-counter Walmart branded shafts than anyone else on the planet. It happens.
Sure.
I just want to push that level a little bit further, kind of like you do with the training. Is I want to push the limits of capability.
Yeah.
Your arrows being one of them. When we took some of the specs off your bow, so you get your bow model, your draw length, draw weight. You gave me your sight types. I'll actually roll into some of the documents I'll send you later with the actual sight tapes. So it's defined by arrow speed, and it'll give you a drop over distance so you can feel really confident with that shot at 70, 72, 74 and a half. You could literally dial it in to something that specific. Cool. When we chose the materials are really important. We have for a long time always used 3K carbon shafts. They're denser, they're harder, they've got better penetration. They're typically a stiffer arrow shaft than a rolled carbon shaft. A rolled carbon is typically what you will see at most stores where you do not see the carbon pattern on it.
Yeah.
3K being the tightness of the weave of the carbon.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what gives the performance capabilities of this shaft. We actually went out to the market and said, there's a lot of great products, but I want to do it better and I want to do it cheaper. Right. So most really
hard to do both.
Yeah. And that's a very difficult task. It took me like 9 months of trying to source the engagement. I was calling overseas into China and the Philippines. I was calling down into Mexico. I was calling over into Europe to carbon providers. Well, Mitsubishi being one of the largest carbon manufacturers in the world out of Japan. Obviously, I could not by volume get into something like that. So we had to find
because they want 10,000 minimums.
Oh yeah, your MOQ is like 40,000 shafts.
Yeah,
right, and that's one run of one stiffness.
Yeah, don't screw it up.
Right. Yeah. So we went through a number of providers. I had samples shipped from all over the world. We tested them, and I finally landed on one of the providers. Now, again, I will never go down that. I would love to have every single component made in the U.S.
Right.
When we get to a large enough stance that we can do that, we will absolutely go down that path. Now, that's a really important milestone for us as a company.
Sure.
Being a small business, that's just not real. Now, I went out and looked at every single carbon manufacturer out there that produces arrows for people, and most of them out of China and Philippines.
Of course.
Which, I mean, it is what it is. It's just by volume.
Amongst 90 trillion other products.
Yep. And we got to asking some questions of these manufacturers. I didn't tell them what the context of that I was asking for the carbon for.
Right.
So we need this type of carbon.
Right.
And I need to see if you can source it, if you can roll it. And found out, because I asked for references, that they actually produce carbon for one of the largest aero manufacturers in the world. So I know the quality's great. I know the build quality and the consistency of the product's going to be there. And we got down to, here's the specs that I need. Well, 90-ish% of the arrows we do are 250 shafts, just because everyone's in that 70 plus poundage range. And you have to have a 250 to handle the force of the string puts on the arrow. So you need that level of stiffness.
Yeah.
You're at a 70-pound bow. So we were able to bridge the gap. And this is where the math kind of comes into play. We have this massive equation that we use that builds in all the factors of you, the shooter, what you're trying to do with it. Again, max distance shots, one of them. But I was able to bridge the gap with you with a 300 shaft with a shorter overall length. So where you really sat in like the 285-ish spine range, well, no one makes a 285. So you have to take a 300 spine, cut it down to create that stiffness. And that stiffness is correlated to the speed at which your arrow is exiting the bow, which then puts pressure on the shaft and causes flex.
Yeah, it's going to flex for sure.
If you have it too weak, it'll come off the bow, typically to the right. If it's too stiff, it'll come off to the left. Okay. You want to find the blend between the two. And the arrow is always going to flex. So if you ever watch an arrow come off in super slow-mo, it's wobbling all over the place. And typically you want it to wobble up and down because that's where the spine is sitting.
Yeah.
So we had all of our arrows spine aligned. And again, that's why we have all of our markings on here set to that. So you know where the top of your spine is all the way across. And we build the arrows so that, again, you have visual cues on your setup to tell you where your spine sits. Mm-hmm. Every arrow will need to be noctuned. And again, you're starting to see technology step into the realm like with Ultra, where they're spineless.
Yeah.
And that's game changing. As we talked to the guys at Elite, kind of how they did that, the methodology behind it. But it's also hyper expensive to do.
Right.
So how do I bridge the gap between a match grade arrow and a mid grade cost? And that was what we targeted. So when we broke this out, we got the shafts in. The name of the shaft is Gungnir. When we talk about Norse mythology, Gungnir is Odin's spear. Odin's spear, when put in the hands of any mortal man, will always be deadly and accurate. That's imagery. You got the feeling about it, and obviously that's what we're trying to do.
Firing me up,
right? You just want to get your mug horn of ale and go to the mead hall and start singing.
Let's go.
And then we looked at components, right? So yours is going to use a little bit of a different component just because of the weight needed behind it. And I know what you're going to be doing with it. Our standard setup is actually a 48 grain combined half outsert with a ballistic collar. Now, advantages to that is, one, you get better protection on the front end of the shaft. You get more mass on the front end of the shaft. It gives you the ability to change weights. So if you down the line needed to add, and this is a feature we're going to add down the line, you wanted to add a more grain weight to the end, you can do one of two things. You can either change your field point weight, which then translates to broadhead weight.
Sure.
Or down the line, when we start adding different weight types to the ballistic collar, you could switch out and add another 20 grains, another 30 grains. You'll see a lot of other systems as well where you can take in and screw in weights down the middle of the shaft into the back end of the insert. Like Gold Tips weight system. That's another one of the ways you can do that. Most archers are never going to touch it.
Right.
They will never go down that path because their capabilities don't match the specs of what that arrow could truly accomplish.
Right.
For you being this type of a shooter, well, now we've cut it down to 28 inches, right? So now I'm trying to figure out how do I gain the right kind of mass for the arrow and the stiffness that you're shooting. So now we've got a 100 grain field point, which should match your broadheads.
Right.
We use these specific kinds of field points because the length of the field point should translate to the weight balance and length of the broadhead once it goes on.
So you're talking about the actual physical length of this, which is slightly more elongated than your traditional field tip.
Yep.
And yeah, we'll show you, images and some of that stuff here, but I mean, I can definitely see.
So it matches, right? And a lot of times, again, for the average archer, they're never going to notice that. we may have to be in a scenario where we're taking a 60-yard shot. I mean, that's going to have to be on the perfect scenario, the right animal,
right,
optimal conditions. But that's a reality.
Sure.
You go south of the Mason-Dixon and east of the Mississippi, ain't happening.
No.
They're probably to 20, 25 yards, so they would never notice that impact at distance.
Right.
You see a lot of guys that start practicing with broadheads, and same reason I don't use mechanicals. Nothing wrong with them. Those
I don't either.
Please don't shoot the messenger.
You're in a safe place. You're in a safe place.
Good.
Yeah. I got some iron wheels that are on their way here now. So
the single bevel or the double bevel?
If you want me to be completely honest, a buddy of mine just texted me yesterday and goes, "Hey, do you shoot iron wheels?" And I was like, "No." I said, "But I know my buddy Marty works for Iron Wheel," and he goes, "Oh," he goes, "Well, I just switched he switched like up to like a 125 or something like that,"
Mm-hmm.
and he goes, "I got some leftover hundreds." He goes, "I'll ship them to you.
You're gonna love them."
And I was like, "That's a cool birthday present."
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I'm fired up now.
And Bill at Iron Wheel, probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He's a very cool individual. And again, you talk about knowledge share.
Yeah.
Being able to sit down and talk to him about that. Same reason I use Iron Wheels.
Yeah.
Because of Bill.
Yeah.
He's been able to talk through why they perform the way they do. And I will flat out tell you, it took me a little while to learn how to tune them. Yeah. Because they control so much more of the airflow over the front end of the arrow than a lot of broadheads do.
Yeah.
Mine were actually dropping off super hard. Well, I had to go and then adjust my rest to compensate for that drop with the broadhead. It didn't really impact my field point impact points. So I was able to start dialing it in. And after a few conversations with their team, it was on point. And they perform and they fly so well over distance, which is why they're one of the top grade products on the market.
Yeah.
But they're so well engineered by people that nerd out on it, like me.
Aerodynamics, it's understanding how that thing is going to cut through the air and
weight, right? You start changing weights on things, and like you'll have archers all season that will shoot a standard field point, and then all of a sudden they're jumping up to a mechanical that's sitting out another 2 inches past the end of the arrow.
100%.
Well, now you're changing the mass towards
FOC.
Yeah, and for a lot of guys, FOC is a big deal.
Yeah,
I actually don't care about FOC all that much. Okay. It's important. But to me, that's not the factor I'm looking for. And like when you look at your arrow build, and I've got your specs here. So your arrows, once these are all set up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, there that is.
So your arrows will have a kinetic energy of.
Do you use that?
I do. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So you should have 84 foot-pounds of kinetic energy and then 0.616 slugs at impact. Slugs is the more important factor on the arrow build because that's the actual amount of mass it takes to stop the arrow. So the higher your slug percentage, the more mass it's going to take to stop at. 0.4 is kind of the benchmark. Anything over 0.4 is going to be lethal. Same thing when you like pound weight on the bow. Anything over 50 pounds is going to be lethal. Well, my bow's at 72, yours is at 70. We're now pushing the limits of how much energy these arrows can actually maintain over distance.
Yeah.
And I'll send you a drop chart that'll show you your energy bleed over distance.
Right.
And you're still carrying enough kinetic energy at 80 yards to potentially cause a complete pass through, barring anything of like hitting a femur, shoulder blade the wrong way. But you hit the rib cage, and you should carry hypothetically enough energy to just blow right through it.
Wow.
And again, now you put in the technology that like guys at Iron Will and Bill and his team have put into the technical design of that broadhead.
Yeah.
Your capabilities have just gone way up. So
I feel like I'm like getting educated and you're like exciting me, firing me up. I'm like, and now you know why they're called death darts.
Right. But it's that confidence, right? Like you want that confidence in your products. The same reason you buy a very specific kind of bow because it feels good in your hand.
Right.
You want to have that confidence in every aspect of your archery setup.
Sure.
And we coat the shafts in a hydrophobic substance. I won't tell you what that is. I'm sure you can probably guess.
Proprietary.
But again, you look at scenarios like you hit something. Well, if you hit something fast enough, heat causes friction. Friction can cause blood to coagulate. That creates more friction on the shaft. You may not get a pass through. I'm going way deep in the science, and most people, again, will never do that. But I'm going to put it on every single arrow shaft.
Yeah.
For that reason. Now, other reason I do is like if you shoot 3Ds, that slick hydrophobic surface usually puts you in a position where the foam is not sticking as hard, so it's easier to pull out of a target.
Yeah.
So more of a practical use.
And I have no idea why, but the arrows that I have been using, which are a mass massively common arrow. I've no idea why. Whenever we've gone to TAC, Western Hunt Fest, whatever, and shot 3D targets, or if I've just gone to the local shop, for us, it's No Limits.
Great guys, by the way. They're
100%.
I like them.
They're our go-to and will continue to be, Phil and the crew there. But I don't know why all of my arrows, like there could be 8 of us shooting,
right,
and mine are always the hardest to pull. And I have no idea why. I'm shooting the same diameter arrow as everybody else. I'm not even shooting the heaviest, biggest, or, even the fastest arrow for that matter. I mean, look at Jason, who's at 32 inches, and he's shooting like 6 to 8 more FPS than I am. It looks like a freaking catapult coming out of his bow.
Right.
And my arrows are harder to pull. I've never understood that, and I still don't.
A lot of it's just what they're coated in, right? Because you get rolled carbon. Rolled carbon itself it feels smooth, but when it hits foam, when it hits stuff like that, it tends to stick. It causes that friction, and they're just hard to pull out. One of the same reasons we use polished stainless steel versus, and you see a lot of field points out there, they're just forged steel points. There's nothing crazy to them. They're not polished. I want to create as many friction reducing surfaces as possible, which again, why we coat them. If you are any shooter that's doing a 3D shoot, you're doing a TAC, you're doing a Western Hunt Fest, as silly as this is, go to the gun store, go to the gun section of the sporting goods store and buy a rod and reel cloth or a gun cloth. It's a silicone cloth.
Yeah.
Wipe your arrows.
Yeah. I carry one of those little
arrow lubes.
Yeah. Those seem like they work for.
They're good for about 4 shots.
Yep. 100%.
And that's the thing that sucks about it, is you do have to continue to reapply. We want to try and change that, right? And that's why they're all coated in this chemical substance. Super proprietary stealth technology. And honestly, most of the stuff, and guys have been doing it for years. I actually got it out of my knowledge of, I'm again detail freak, right? I'm very anal retentive about my vehicles. They're always clean, they're always polished, and a lot of that methodology taken from other industries.
Yeah.
What's some of the best technology on the market that's hydrophobic and creates a frictionless surface?
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you to go figure that one out.
I'm tracking.
And you're seeing a lot of arrow companies do that. Like, look at the VAP SS as an example.
Yeah.
If you've ever held that arrow shaft, it is slick.
Yeah.
And that's
I can tell technology. That when I touch these, like they just feel, there's a different feel to them for sure.
So little changes like that. And then for you, obviously the wraps. Wraps to me, I have a lot of guys that don't like them. I personally like them.
Yeah.
I'm getting older. My vision isn't quite as good as what it used to be. It gives me another visual reference to follow the arrow, especially when you have a light colored wrap. To me, they also protect the arrow. So like you blow a vein on there, you just peel the wrap, throw a new wrap on there, refletch it, but it doesn't damage the shaft.
Yeah.
You do it bare shafted and you blow a vein, you're going to be taking a blade of some kind against that carbon, and you're compromising the integrity of the carbon at that point, which is why I don't do it. Especially when you're spending $25 to $35 an arrow.
Yeah.
Do you really want to throw it away?
No.
Right. So another way to protect the arrow, gives you more longevity, allows you to stay with the technology as long as you can. Right.
Right.
And then we look at things like the knock collar. Again, kind of a controversial thing. Some people don't like them. I personally do, because I have smoked a knock with one of my arrows, and not only did it destroy the knock, but it blew open the end of the arrow shaft. Arrow's done. Here it hits the knock and hits the knock collar. The knock is toast. The knock collar may be damaged, but it didn't damage your arrow shaft. Now, other benefits that starts to add mass to the arrow. We start adding all into the overall weight.
Sure.
Kinetic energy, and then translates to slug. But that's why your arrows are so unique. But these are purely for you.
Yeah.
And I could probably shoot these arrows, but they won't perform the way for me, the way they will for you off your bow. And that's that unique. That's why we do what we do. I want it to be something that's truly yours.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'll tell you, I've had typically I go through a dozen and a half arrows a year, right? I'm not shooting 10,000 arrows a year. I mean, some people do, right? And obviously if you shoot 10,000 arrows a year, you're probably wearing arrows out as opposed to breaking them. And that's okay, right? But for me, I've kind of always that's been kind of my cycle. And I had a lady actually like 2 or 3 years in a row now at TAC, and she's at all of them. I'm totally missing her name, and I apologize. She owns Badass Archery in Utah. And she has made me like the last 2 or 3 sets of them. And just like the timing of it worked out where like when I got to TAC here in Colorado, I'm like, man, I must need some more arrows. And I'm like, I'll just wait till next weekend. And she makes and cuts and, you know, the whole 9 yards for me. And she does a great job. And this is the first like set of arrows for me that I've ever bought where it was like custom arrow wrap. Everything about this is like super sexy and has all these like bells and whistles on it that are just like I told you when you handed it to me, I'm like, man, I don't even know. It's like it scares me to shoot these things because they look so cool. I don't want to break any of them or lose any of them.
We get that a lot actually. When again, because you've now seen that personal touch. Like and for years you've got your Hike Harvest Colorado logo on there. Yours are all set up to be a 2.5 degree right helical offset. So for me, what that translates to is control over distance. So your arrows will stabilize faster off the bow. You'll have more control with a broadhead, especially now using the iron will.
Right.
You will see a massive difference in control of the arrow flight over time.
Yeah.
So you hopefully consistently hitting tighter groups at distance. And that's every single one of these components we're building in there.
And that's for me is huge because I think if I look at myself shooting wise, I shoot enough to where I get to where my groupings 20, 30 are usually pretty good. You know, you get to this time of year and I'm like, I'm putting in, I'm not the guy who's trying to, you know, make sure they're all touching. I'm the guy where I'm like, I want to be in here, right? Yep. Like if I'm somewhere in that neighborhood, we talk about moving out to 40 and 50 and, you know, my effective range, in my opinion, is like, I want to be inside of 60, like 100%.
Yep.
The longest arrow that I've shot at an elk was at 55. And that was like, whoo, buddy. Like,
yeah, you're pushing it.
And so to me, knowing that and the reason that I was like, okay, talk to me. And you and I kind of discussed going with that helical was because of what you just said. Like I want to try and improve where that arrow is going to land if I'm getting out to 40-ish, you know, and being ethically, obviously, you know, conscious about that. Like if I'm out in the field, I'm not shooting unless, you know, I'm looking at something that's just impossible to not shoot at if he's at 52 or something like that, or 58 or whatever. To me, that's a huge aspect of why I went with that was I'm like, if I can improve this much in that extra 10 yards, 12 yards, 15 yards, then that gives me even more confidence that if that shot presents itself, I can execute that shot.
Absolutely. Well, pro cons, right? And then this is where we get into the real nuts and bolts of the build is the more fletching you have, the higher degree offset and helical. Pros, controllability, they stabilize faster. It gives you more control of your broadhead. That's why you use a 4-fletch. What do you lose? You lose feet per second, right? Because you just have more drag on the arrow. And that's where people tend to shy away from it. Well, for me, and I use the same methodology with my rifle, I don't necessarily need the fastest bullet. I don't necessarily need the heaviest bullet. I want the bullet that I can consistently put in the same hole over and over and over and over and over again at any distance. And I know it's always going to perform exactly as I expect it to.
Right.
Arrows is kind of the same methodology. When you get that level of confidence, that's one less X factor that's going through your brain as you're drawing back.
Yeah.
And that's really what I want to take people to from just a comfort level is how can I eliminate as many of your stressors on your shot cycle as possible? And if it's the quality of the arrow, that's one thing I can help control that. I can build you something that's that epic. And then we get into some of the more personal sides of it. I like designing things for people. I think it's fun because it's yours, right? You're not going to go to.
These are all one of one.
Yeah, they're 101, and you'll never see them again unless you order your next set. And even then, I think I have I tooled on another design after I got these produced. I was like, oh, this next one, we're doing this one.
Yeah. Well, I hope these are going to last me a while, or I hope that these find a good target. And by a good target, I mean a moving one that would require me to need more. And
Absolutely.
So, but I think the cool thing about these, we'll put a whole bunch of pics and stuff like that we'll include here because I want people to be able to kind of see them too. Was you and I went through and I gave a whole bunch of different versions. I tell people this all the time. Jason, who's does such a great job, and we were talking about logos and branding, all those things, like all the branding that you see with everything that we have has been built by Jason.
Right.
And we still have probably 10 logo variations that we've never even released. And so I sent you a bunch of these. I'm like, well, what do you think? And you picked this one, and we kind of went with the Colorado theme. So we have our logo. I was going to put the Colorado theme back here. And now actually I'm like, oh, dang it. We should have totally done that. It's basically our logo with the Colorado flag just dropped into it. And that's what this wrap has. And there's a little bit more special meaning to these that I don't think we necessarily have to get into, that you incorporated. And I hope that it's going to be, I don't want to say a whole lot because I kind of have also a little bit of some intentional stuff out there that where I want to maybe this story to land and
Sure.
end someday. But you incorporated that in there. You and I went back and forth, and it's just, I think it will, number one, it just elevates everything from a perspective of like how cool these arrows are, how special they are, and hopefully will have an even better ending to them at some point too, which is awesome. But I know we're kind of really nerding out. I love this is why I love the podcast, because I tell people that selfishly it's so fun to do these because I always bring in and get to like talk to people where
Right.
I get to learn from them. I get to pick their brain. I get to kind of get a chance to get into their world a little bit. And we've had so many cool people that have come on here where I'm like, wow, that was so like fun. And then, you go back and it's like, then you play the other side of the game, which is like, now we got to produce it and we got to put it out and all these other things. And I look at, our following is still, a work in progress. And I'm like, yeah, but it was just awesome to do. I have so much fun doing it.
And it's like, these are conversations you want to have sitting at the bar having a beer. Right? This is the type of stuff you start to talk about. And this is why this community is so important to me.
Yeah.
And we won't go into the details of some of the customization here, but it struck me emotionally as well too. Because we spend this time in the woods with some of the most important people in our lives.
Yeah.
I get to do it, thankfully, with Adam. And you met Adam. If you've spent any time around the dude, he's one of the most genuine human beings you will meet on the planet. And he legitimately cares at a level that I don't think a lot of people do or are prepared for. And him being able to trust me enough to take me into the woods and teach me to hunt. And I've been around hunting my whole life.
Yeah.
My family's from Nebraska. You're from the Nebraska area.
We had some good Nebraska stories before we got on. That's right.
Goddamn turkeys. Goddamn turkeys. But it's having that and having someone bring you into their world.
Yeah.
And that's the hunting community. And especially now with everything's going on in Colorado.
Buddy. Big year.
Culture behind it.
Yeah.
And people are embracing a level we've never seen. But having those friends you get to spend that quality time with.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the world that's worth that. There's no amount of money. There's no amount of notoriety.
Yeah.
Than those days in the woods.
Yeah.
Those campfire conversations. I was on another podcast with Bucks of America. We were talking about the importance of campfire stories.
Yeah.
Campfire talk, especially in the community of guys. And again, you're seeing so many more women step into this realm. And it's cool to see it because it's no longer just kind of a one-dimensional thing, but that fireside chat with your friends.
Yeah. If you go to our Spotify account, shameless plug,
gotta do it.
The title of the podcast is H3O Campfire Chronicles.
Love it.
Yeah. So it was something that we thought of, or I thought of, I think, and it was the same thing, right? It's the premise of all that. And we years ago talked about how many times we should have just recorded the conversation around camp.
Right.
And I did a couple years ago, and I put one of them out audio only, and there was probably 2 or 3 more where I'm like, man,
I want to hold off on those.
Hold off on a couple of those. There were a couple of things in there that maybe shouldn't be told outside that campfire. Nothing incriminating or anything like that, but maybe a few.
Someone that makes someone blush.
Yeah, a little bit, right? But there's so much value in that, I think, emotionally, and in the camaraderie piece and all that stuff, that it's just, if you haven't been there, you can't explain.
It's hard to describe to people.
Yeah.
I mean, that feeling, you talk about recording. I actually still have a recording from me, Adam, and Guy, our buddy Guy that hunts with us. It was me and Guy's first hunt. Yeah. And we pulled the double. We got the 2 deer within 2 minutes. Now, the story gets even funnier is we got up there. Guy was supposed to pick up ammunition. Guy, I'm not bagging on you, buddy. This is just funny. I love it because we handled it so well, and that's what friends do. Got up there, and he didn't have a rifle, so he was borrowing Adam's rifle.
Done that.
Wrong ammunition.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yep. So I had ammunition for my rifle, so I was like, well, we can just bounce back and forth. It's dialed in.
Yeah.
As long as you just throw the crosshairs on and pull the trigger, you're going to be just fine because we won't be outside of 200 yards.
Yeah.
You're good. So we start walking up the next morning. We're walking up this hill, kind of into the sunshine, and lo and behold, boom, there's a herd of mule deer.
Right.
So I don't see a buck. I only have a buck tag. So I throw my rifle over to Guy, and it was a big rifle. It was one of the old Remington 700s, sniper style with a bull barrel, so heavy rifle, suppressed. Of course, it's not something you can just stand up there and hold.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to put it on my shoulder just to stabilize. So I'm covering my ears, lines up, boom, down goes the deer. Most emotional moment in our lives because he had never hunted before that. He'd never really been a part of it.
Yeah.
This is my first realm really stepping into that part of the process, and turning around and seeing Adam and our other buddy's face and just the pride. It was like a dad over their son.
Yeah.
And the tears and the happiness and the rush of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
While that's going on, our buddy happens to look up and says, Buck. He's grabbed your rifle. Chamber another round, look up there, and sure as hell, buck walking right across in a spot. Great shot. Again, I'm shaking because we're all wound tight.
Yeah.
Go to line up my shot, and I can't hold the rifle still because I can't lay down because it's uphill.
Yeah.
So my buddy comes over, squats down, settled on his shoulder. Poof, down goes the buck. 2 minutes. The most improbable series of events you could think of. And now it's funny because this has not happened with just one animal species. We did this with turkeys a couple years back where me, Adam, and Guy all got our turkeys within a couple hours of each other within a quarter mile.
Yeah.
Which is unheard of.
Yeah.
All massive toms in Nebraska, just craziest stuff. But those stories, and the point I was getting at is they live forever.
For sure.
And these are the stories I hope my son tells and laughs when he looks back at Uncle Adam, Uncle Guy, and Dad.
Yeah.
Like, here's some of the crazy stuff they did. And then hopefully he's creating his own stories.
Yeah.
And that community is just, there's no words for it. And that's why I love it. And like being able to sit here and do this, there's not a lot of other connections where you have this to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's so transcending of everything that we do and so important. And I think a lot of the world just doesn't understand it.
Yeah. I think it's where you run into where we sit now in the landscape of what's going on in the state of Colorado. And I don't think we want to necessarily blow that can of worms open.
Oh, God.
We don't have that much time. But I do want to get to one thing that I know you guys are heavily involved in that does have a lot of impact on kind of what's going on in Colorado. You guys are getting ready to be a part of and have been helping with this Lionheart project.
Yes.
And if you don't know what that is, I want you, number one, tell people about what that is. If you're from Colorado or anywhere near Colorado, you know that this coming November, is pretty critical for us as outdoorsmen and women.
Yep.
And the moniker of trophy hunting for mountain lion. If you've been behind the scenes, we were just at Outdoorsman Days a week ago, which was put on by Dan and Karen Gates. They put in this massive effort to continue creating awareness around Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management and what is happening in our state and some of the ballot box biology. And obviously we know of so much that's trying to be driven, unfortunately, to the voter polls. And we all know well too, unfortunately, that what happened the last time this happened, we as outdoorsmen and women, I wouldn't say lost out, but didn't turn out. I know that when I spoke with Dan, he talked about the fact that there were 33,000 registered voters that they kind of identified that were what we would consider to be outdoorsmen,
Right.
people that live in and vote specifically, that didn't vote at all. And the vote was lost by 30,000.
Yep.
And so, you know,
it was so razor thin. It was almost mind blowing.
Yeah. And so talk a little bit about the, Lionheart.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about what you guys are doing. Let's make sure that people know it's coming up very quickly.
Yep.
And so
this is probably one of the most engaging pieces of documentary that we will have that gives a perception of what hunting is.
Yeah.
And especially with Lionheart, and Robbie and Ashley have crushed this from Blood Origins. And
Yep.
Absolutely, if you get the chance, jump on our Instagram. I'll throw the tag out again tonight. Find the QR code. It's $15 for tickets. It's nothing crazy.
Yep.
Come get dressed up in some country formal. I'll be in my Sunday best. So come on out there and just participate just to see. Like,
what's the date?
So it's Thursday, August 29th.
Yeah.
Doors open, I think, at like 5:30. But
Yeah.
I'll shoot the flyer out over this.
We'll include all that. Make sure that people know.
The film is about the understanding of cat hunting, right? And I think there's such an interesting misconception around when you say cats and predators, right? And there's an emotional tag to that. And people that don't hunt only see what they want to see.
For sure.
Dan Gates did a great job discussing this on like the Mountainside podcast with Bobby. I was listening to that on the way down here of since the 1950s, 200 cats growing to a population of 5,000 to 6,000 roughly.
In Colorado, just in Colorado.
So hard to count because
they're so elusive. They're so hard to find. They're so hard to.
I'm from here. I've never seen a cat. I am born and raised from Colorado. I've still never seen a cougar. I've seen paw prints follow my boot prints up a snowy mountain elk hunting. Yeah, I never saw the cat.
I've lived here for 22 years, and I have never seen one yet.
Yep.
And I have plenty of stories, and I've talked to plenty of people that have. Obviously, we see things that end up in the news and social media and trail cams, right? There was someone posted today. It was here in Colorado, cat in their backyard, and it pretty much looked like he was looking for food.
Yep.
Right.
And again, that's the general public will only ever have a reaction to it when they experience it.
Yeah.
And it's hard because the majority of the voting public in Colorado is not in a situation where more than likely they will ever run into that.
Yeah.
Cat hunting is so difficult. And if you ever get the chance, and if you haven't watched anything, listen to Derek Wolf's stuff. Listen to Luke from Gladiators Unleashed. Hunt Nest, Nestor, Alex Nestor. Go to his stuff. He runs those hunts. You have to have dogs to hunt them because you don't find cats out in the open. And the dogs,
you're not just going to walk around and be like, "Oh, I think there's one over here. Oh, there's a track. I'll just go find one."
Yeah, I found a wet pile of shit, and I'm going to follow that up a mountain. That's just not something you're going to do with these animals, and that's what's so difficult in getting people to see that. And this film, it'll give a new perspective of it from the houndsmen and women that guide these hunts.
Yep.
And we got a really interesting perspective of someone we were educating on this. She's a law enforcement from Castle Rock. As I won't name names, great person to talk to, fun personality, but was very honest. She goes, I don't know a lot about this.
Right.
What do I need to know?
I think that's the big one, right? I feel like that's what happened. I feel like with the Wolf Initiative piece was a misunderstanding, right? And not even a misunderstanding as much as is just a lack of knowledge and people that don't know the whole story.
Nope.
And as we know, right, like depending upon, you can make it as simple as this, like depending upon which channel you choose,
right,
will determine the narrative you will hear. Right. And the thing that I typically say to that too is that I also am a firm believer that it is very easy to find yourself listening to a singular voice. It's very easy to find yourself like, oh, well, I like what they're saying, or that makes sense to me, or whatever that looks like. And it's a difficult task to try to sort through, because you get into a lot of, well, they did this, we did that, I don't like this, I like that. And especially when it gets into an outlet, which to us is usually delivered in the form of news,
right,
Twitter, other social media outlets, right? Things that we're reading, or things that are trying to be projected to us. It's tough. And I find that I really, especially even when we look at what's going on with the presidency and some of those things, like you find such a difficult time, like trying to draw yourself back enough to go, let me think clearly about this, and let me be inquisitive enough to like make my own decision, as opposed to being pulled into a direction.
Well, and you look at that specific aspect of it, people are so ingrained in their identity politics,
that
they won't go outside that boundary because it doesn't fit their identity. And that's one of the saddest things to me. And what I think Dan and Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management are doing so well, it could be so easy to attack the other side.
For sure.
And again, it wouldn't take much because it's facts.
Yeah.
But what they've done is they put it into a perspective of, I don't care if you believe me. I don't care if you hear what I say.
I'm not here for that.
Go to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I will arm you with the resources to educate yourself to make a decision.
Right.
And that's what I think is so interesting about this current proposition, is because the other side of that argument is, well, we're right, you're wrong.
Right.
But there's no context to it. They're not pointing to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They're not pointing to the resources that have been provided. They're not pointing to the education that Blood Oranges put out there. They're not listening to the people that are in the field. They're not taking in the testimony of Colorado Parks and Wildlife officers, which are in the field.
Yeah, it's the way that I look at most of this, and I think it happened with the Wolf Initiative as well, is the angle is to play on emotion,
bingo,
sympathy, right, feelings,
right,
all these other things, right, and it's very easy to have all of those on either side of the coin.
100%,
right. And so it really doesn't matter which side of that you're on. And I've had some really interesting stuff where I mentioned to you a guy that has come in and he's been training, kind of going through the summer and whatever. And we talked a little bit about like, what do you do in terms of conservation? What do you do in terms of spreading your knowledge or sharing what hunting means to you and those types of things? And he started to tell me how in the last year, all of the game meat between deer, elk, he went on a wild boar hunt. He brought me some here last week, which was
so good.
Absolutely amazing. Thanks, Wally. Appreciate you. He's been sharing all kinds of stuff with me lately. And he said, when the holidays came around last year, I made everything at this holiday party out of wild game meat. And we had all these friends that came over, and people that I know aren't hunters. There are people that are, acquaintances with us and those types of things. And I wanted them to get an opportunity to actually consume it. Right. And he goes, the amount of people that were like, oh my gosh, this is so good, and he's like, well, I harvested that and I made this and I cooked it and whatever else. And he's like, I've tried to take that as an opportunity to not just be down one side. And I think that's, if I look at us as outdoorsmen, sportsmen, people that are hunting, fishing, whatever you want to call it, that, it's pretty easy to try and like draw this line of like, who's on this side of it and who's on that side of it. And he's like, I don't care which side of it that you're on, because we're all capable of being human. But what I want you to do is be able to listen and understand where I'm at. And I can do the same for the other side. I have plenty of people, including that are in like my family, that don't hunt. Don't hunt at all. In fact, part of them, the few that are on kind of the in-law side, really don't agree with it whatsoever. But they have a respect for me and the way that I go about it and the method of, especially from an archery perspective and the work that I put in and all that. And they're like, well, that seems like that's okay.
Right.
And not that I'm looking for approval, but I find that that's a big part of this thing, which is like, we can still live in this balance of understanding both sides of this without needing it to be this, like,
And I think that's the gap that people unintentionally create on both sides.
Sure.
And I really think when you look at people that are in the state of Colorado for the reasons they live here.
Yeah.
And you've been here 22 years, so you get a special Dakota ring and a patch. You're like an honorary native. I think it's 12 years it gets that point.
I tell people all the time, when they go, hey, where are you from? I go, I'm not sure where I'm at now. What I should
12 years is a cutoff. From a native, I'm laying that line down.
That's 12 years. That's good. That's good to know.
You're a native with us.
That's good. I mean, I'm at like 50% of my life almost has been here.
That idea and why people are here, it's so similar. They have a passion for the outdoors.
Yeah.
They love nature.
Yeah.
They appreciate its beauty.
Yeah.
They want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
They enjoy being in it. Most of them care about leaving as minimal footprints as possible.
Sure.
That's all the qualities of a hunter.
Right.
And the interesting part about this, my buddy Drew, I get to brag on you a little bit, buddy. I decided the other night, did your arrows. So he's the ones that got the War Party Ranch arrows. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But he was over, and one of the things I noticed with him, and Adam does the same thing, a lot of the hunters I'm around do the same thing. They're walking through the woods and they see some piece of human interaction laying on the ground, whether it's a bottle cap, a wrapper or something. They'll pick it up and throw it in their pack.
Yep.
And we do it. But I asked Drew one time why. And he goes, it doesn't matter whether it's an elk or a piece of trash. It's about respecting the environment. And he goes, if it's something as simple as me just picking up that piece of trash and taking it back to where it's from, I've left where I just stepped in a better place.
Sure.
And he goes, I don't care if you hunt. If we viewed our state and viewed our resources like that, how much better Colorado would be.
For sure.
And that was a really important thing, is just even the littlest engagement has an impact.
Yeah.
And that's that common ground I think a lot of people in Colorado have, is they appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's just now, how do we bridge the gap between why we appreciate it?
Yeah.
And I think we'd find a lot more common ground than we realize, but it goes back to that identity politics. People are so scared to step outside of that and have their own educated opinion that they never see that engagement. They never see that interaction. And that's why I love Dan for the way he portrays it. And he's a character. He's larger than life, but he can connect with you.
Yeah,
and that's what I hope people see. And with Lionheart, especially the way that Robbie and Ashley and the film crew and the people that put it together are portraying this, is they want to give you a perspective of not only the animal, not only its impact on the environment, how we view the impact, how we've managed the impact, how that impact also translates down to business owners, to family traditions, to cultures. And the lady that we were talking with, that's the police officer, she had a great perspective of when we put it into the idea why the dogs do this, because they love it. They live for this.
Yeah.
I've been around Nestor and a couple of his animals. That is their job.
Yep.
And you guys from Nebraska, we had farm dogs. They lived for getting in the pickup, sitting by the gate, making sure the cattle didn't get out like that. It was a job to them.
Right.
These hounds are the same way.
For sure.
And she's like, that translates to us. That's how our canines are. They live to go to work every day. They love it. They get depressed when they don't get to do it. And so it's just so much more than just the one moment that everyone latches onto, which is the kill.
Right.
And again, any real hunter worth their salt doesn't enjoy that exact moment. That's not a fun thing.
100%.
And it's emotional. It's something you never forget. It hits you down deep.
Right. And I think especially as what our conversations revolved around, which is archery, is the personal and up closeness and everything about it is a part of me that I think I took a huge responsibility in now, a handful or more years ago, where I actually quit rifle hunting because I felt it was massively impersonal. And I felt that I was like, that is, number one, obviously I wouldn't say easy, but I almost had a part of me that felt like I was being unfair.
Sure. I mean, there's no other sport in the world where the main competitor consistently put themselves at the utmost disadvantage than a hunter. And again, I know a lot of guys that have quit rifle hunting for that. A rifle, you can really reach out and touch a creature. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that. I'll never quit rifle hunting because I love it. Same reason I won't.
Yeah, I'm not looking down on anybody for it.
Same reason I won't bow hunt turkeys, because they're turkeys. And damn turkeys. Damn turkeys.
I know.
A shotgun, but it's just so interesting to see that, and I think it's really the idea behind what Lionheart is, to give people a chance to see it.
Yeah.
See something that they would never normally participate in. They get to see it from a perspective of the wildlife officer, the hunter, the houndsman, the guide,
right?
The people that are involved in the process. And Robbie, if I misspeak this, I hope I'm not misspeaking your message. And if you haven't followed Robbie on Blood Origins, absolutely do it.
Yeah.
He's one of the most genuine dudes you'll ever meet, and he's just fun to talk to. But it's to educate.
Right.
And legislators have not done a good job educating. It's very easy to write a piece of legislation. It's very easy to put a law forth for debate without context. And I think we see a lot of that, which is unfortunate. And especially in scenarios like this, where you talked about that emotional attachment, it is very hard to combat that.
Yeah.
So Lionheart is hopefully an opportunity. And if you are not a hunter, to any hunters that want to go, please buy tickets. Obviously, we'd love to have you there. But if you're not a hunter, join us. Come spend time with us. Spend time with people that are in the community. Spend time with people like Robbie and Ashley and Adam and myself. You're going to go, I assume.
That's the plan.
Come see us. Come talk to us. Like, have a conversation. If you don't hunt, this is your opportunity to have an engagement that you're not going to get elsewhere. You're not going to see it on the news. You're not going to see it in advertisements. You're probably not going to see it in any type of media.
Yeah.
This is your ability to expose yourself to it. And whatever you leave the film seeing, believing, and understanding, I don't care what it is, but at least you know more about the subject than you did an hour before you walked in. And at least you can have an educated decision. And if at the end of it, you still think Prop 91 is the way you want to vote, I mean, more power to you. I don't agree with you. I'll hopefully ask you to say, if you're still going that path, call me. Have a conversation with you. I'll go grab a beer with you at the bar, just sit down and talk, just to give you perspective. I'm not going to try and persuade you to believe what I believe, but I want to arm you to make an educated decision. And that's what the Blood Origins team and everyone that's been involved with this film has really tried hard to do, is educate.
Yeah.
And that's more powerful than anything.
For sure. And, you know, it's I'm excited because I know you guys have worked really hard to promote it. I know when Adam came over, we had some of the flyers and the QR codes and stuff out in our booth, and I think it's something that is going to be super impactful, super informative, and it's just going to be a great night. And hopefully, it's like you said. I think it would be a huge win if we had non-hunters that show up at that, and I think that's the interesting part. Is I think us being on the side of the outdoorsmen and hunters and people that, you know, are kind of obviously have our camp, and people that are maybe on the other side of it, is being willing to actually try to have those conversations. And I think we would encourage that. Whereas, you know, my experience is typically from the other side has not been that. It's been met with resistance. It's been met with animosity. It's been met with, you know,
attacks,
you know, and that's unfortunate. I'm not saying that that's, again, you know, being very unilateral, you know, right. But I think as a country as a whole, we're seeing a lot of that on lots of issues. And
if we just sat down and had a conversation, I mean, and people, I say this at work, I say this anytime I'm looking at engaging with someone that I'm trying to sell to in my day-to-day life. People have forgotten how to talk.
Right.
I've gotten more, right. It's easy to disassociate. I am terrible about it. Like to the point where my son will be like, and he's 3, Daddy, get off your phone. I'm like, sorry, buddy. Yeah. But we've forgotten because it's so easy to disconnect, and it's so easy to go down a rabbit hole of something that has no context. And I encourage people. I mean, your viewership is kind of a broad viewership, but if you have questions, reach out to us.
Yeah.
Like you will never insult me to have a conversation. If you want to know something more, there's a million resources out there. And if we don't have it, I'm sure 10 people I could call right now that would provide it to you.
Right.
But that's really what this is about and how we want to continue to do it. And then through Oolers and through some of the other stuff that we support, I mean, if you haven't looked into War Party and War Party Ranch, War Party Movement, do it. What they do to impact the community, and from taking Indigenous women that have been beaten, abused, put in bad situations, and they find ways to get them out of that cycle of life and into something that allows them to thrive and grow.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many engagements with us as outdoorsmen and hunters and conservationists and being part of our community that people don't realize. We're not the bloodthirsty killers. We're not the and just the big muscle roided out Vikings looking for blood. That's not who we are. We want to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
And I'm blessed enough to have a platform and friends to do this through archery, through hunting, through events. So it's been an interesting journey. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I know that it's been the same for us. We're super excited to continue kind of running that path to getting, these in hand today. And not only that, but just letting you kind of walk through these things, because I think the from this side, right, which is the touch and feel piece of all this, that most people are like, oh yeah, it's an arrow. And then as you talk through it and show, number one, knowledge base, which is there's this seems so like such a simple tool, right?
Right.
And it started as the most simple tool, right? Carved out of wood and everything else. And now you look at how much thought goes into this in terms of the construction, in terms of the material, in terms of the way that everything on this is situated to perform at like such a high level. It's awesome. These things are a work of art. I think there's a part of me that says one of these is for sure just going to get set aside, and maybe what we'll do is find a place for it here on the wall.
Absolutely.
Or something like that. And so thank you for that.
Welcome.
Make sure, guys, like we want to make sure that you guys have all the linkage, especially to you guys. You're pretty easy to find on social media. I know website as well. If you're looking for a set of these arrows, go in, fill out the form. He's got a really quick and simple form that allows him to start understanding, like, what are you shooting, lengths, widths, weights, all these other things, and check them out. He can build you a custom set of your own, whether it's just because you like to shoot bows or because you got you like cool stuff. You'll hit the mark either way.
Absolutely. And when you fill out the form, obviously one of the things that I want to make really clear to people, it's not just a mindless fill it out, send it to me. I am probably going to call you. I'm going to want to spend a little time with you. One, I like to get to know the people I'm building this for. It is personal for me. I do this in my free time because I love it.
Yep.
But I want it to be something that when you get it in your hands, it's just as important to you as it is to me and will always be to me. So
sure.
Spend some time with us. And then, like I said, thank you for having us on. It's been fun. I love being able to just sit and shoot the breeze with you. It's one of the easiest conversations ever. But again, if you guys are looking for the Blood Origins tickets, we'll pop the link on here afterwards with the QR code. So they're $15. It's nothing crazy. Come have a couple whiskey drinks, get in your country finest. Or your finest, whichever you want to dress. If you don't have a cowboy hat, we will.
It's going to be awesome.
It's at the Paramount downtown, Thursday, August 29th. Doors open, I think, at like 5:30. So pop down, come spend an evening with us, gain some education, and like, follow, share. Especially these guys. Hunt Like Harvest has been a great proprietor of who we are in the community. And again, we appreciate you just having some time to sit down and shoot the breeze, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, brother.
He signed it off. I don't even have to. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time, and appreciate you checking it out.